Chapter 2. They walked the remaining distance toward the building without rushing. The trail curved gently, drawing them closer to the heart of the property. Lilac trees leaned softly along the path, their scent drifting lightly in the moving air. Cherry blossoms above caught the sunlight in faint, shifting patterns that danced across the ground as they passed beneath. Jessica's steps were still careful, but no longer hesitant. She kept her eyes moving, taking in the space around her in quiet pieces. There was something different here, something she could not quite name, but she felt it. As the trail opened, Pearl's Haven came fully into view. The building stood steady against the landscape, not imposing, but welcoming in its presence. Large windows reflected the light from the bay, and balconies faced outward toward the open water. At the entrance, a simple sign rested near the drive: Pearl's Haven. Jessica slowed just slightly. Her eyes moved from the sign to the building, and then across the grounds. To one side, a small parking area held a handful of vehicles. Nothing crowded, nothing hurried. Beyond that, a playground sat within a neat, fenced space. Two small children climbed over a play structure, while an older woman stood nearby, keeping watch. She glanced toward the building, noticing Jessica, and offered a small, easy wave. Jessica hesitated, then raised her hand in return. The exchange was brief, but it lingered. A little further along, a woman stepped out of her car, gathering something from the back seat before closing the door. She looked up for a moment, catching sight of Jessica, and nodded in a quiet, friendly way. Jessica nodded back, though her movement was more uncertain. She wasn't used to that. Not anymore. The feeling settled into her slowly. No questions, no distance, just recognition. Pearl opened the main entrance door and stepped inside. Jessica followed, pausing for a moment as the warmth of the building settled around her. The foyer was simple but welcoming. A large fern stood beside the stairwell, and on one wall hung a framed piece of needlework that read, "Therefore welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you, for the glory of God." Romans 15:7. Nothing about the entrance was elaborate. It simply felt cared for. To the right was the office for Pearl's Haven. Beyond the reception counter, two desks stood neatly arranged, while three chairs faced the counter for residents or visitors waiting to be seen. To the left was the door to apartment 1A. Pearl smiled as she noticed Jessica taking it all in. "My apartment is upstairs," she said gently. "Come along, I'll put the kettle on." She led Jessica through the office toward the staircase at the back, Barney padding ahead as though leading the way. Jessica followed quietly, feeling something she hadn't expected. She remained standing for a moment, unsure of where to place herself. Barney wandered toward the balcony door, settling easily as though this was his usual spot. Jessica moved slowly toward him. The balcony door stood slightly open, allowing the fresh air to drift inward. She stepped outside. From there, the full view returned. Conception Bay stretched wide, uninterrupted and open. Kelly's Island sat low against the horizon, while Bell Island rose further out, grounding the distance. The water moved steadily, unchanged. Jessica rested her hands lightly against the railing. Below her, the movement of the property continued quietly. Voices from the playground, the distant sound of a car door, footsteps crossing the path. Life. Simple, shared, present. She didn't realize how long it had been since she had stood somewhere that felt connected. Inside, the kettle clicked. "I hope tea is all right," Pearl called from the kitchen. Jessica turned back toward the doorway. "It's perfect," she said softly. She stepped inside again. Pearl set two mugs on the table, along with a small plate, simple, warm, and inviting. Jessica sat down slowly. This time, it felt easier. She wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth settle in. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, "I'm not used to this," she admitted. Pearl glanced up. "To what?" Jessica hesitated, then answered honestly. Being somewhere, and not feeling like I have to explain myself. Pearl held her gaze gently. You don't have to do that here. Jessica lowered her eyes slightly. Her voice softened. I don't know what's true anymore. Pearl leaned forward just slightly. Not to correct, just to meet her where she was. Come near to God, and he will come near to you, she said quietly. Jessica looked up. Come near, she repeated. The words felt different this time. Not distant, not unreachable. Possible. It's not something you can lose because someone tells you that you have, Pearl added gently. Jessica sat with that. Really sat with it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was steady. Jessica began to feel something she hadn't expected. Not certainty, not clarity, but something just as important. A sense that she might not be as alone as she had believed. The warmth of the room settled in around them, steady and unhurried. Jessica held the mug in both hands, letting the quiet remain for a moment longer. It was no longer the kind of silence she felt she had to fill. Outside, the movement of the day continued, voices faint in the distance, a car door closing somewhere below, the soft rhythm of life moving on without pressure. I don't know what my life is supposed to look like now, Jessica said quietly. Pearl nodded. That's all right, she replied. You don't have to have that figured out yet. Jessica looked down at the table, then back toward the balcony, as though trying to piece together something she could hold on to. I had everything planned, she continued, or at least, I thought I did. Her fingers tightened slightly around the mug, and now it's just gone. Pearl let her finish without interruption. Then we don't try to rebuild everything at once, she said gently. Jessica looked back at her. We start with what's in front of you. A small pause followed. Pearl continued, her tone careful but steady. I could use some help here, Pearl said. Jessica looked up slightly, uncertain. Help? Pearl nodded gently. Tell me, what kind of work have you done? Jessica hesitated at first, then answered quietly. I worked part-time with one of the elders. He had a small cleaning business. Pearl nodded, as though that made perfect sense. And what about computers? Are you comfortable with them? Jessica gave a small, modest shrug. I know my way around one. A faint smile touched Pearl's expression. And people? Jessica paused, then answered honestly. I've been in the ministry since I was little, going door to door, speaking with people. Pearl leaned back slightly, taking it all in. Then she nodded once. I think you may be exactly who I need. Jessica looked at her, unsure she had heard correctly. I need someone to help me keep things running here, Pearl continued. Cleaning, helping with the tenants, some computer work, and other things as they come up. Jessica listened carefully, her expression shifting from uncertainty to quiet focus. It would be a modest salaried position, Pearl said. There's also a one-bedroom apartment here on the property. You wouldn't pay rent, though you would be responsible for your own utilities. Jessica stared at her for a moment, scarcely believing what she had heard. I don't know what to say. Pearl smiled softly. You don't have to say anything right now. Jessica looked down at her tea, her eyes beginning to glisten. This would change everything. Pearl nodded gently. That's my hope. She held Jessica's gaze with quiet kindness. I need someone I can trust to help care for this place and the people who live here. You need a place to begin again. I think the Lord may have brought us together for a reason. Jessica swallowed hard, emotion catching in her voice. Thank you. Pearl reached across the table and rested her hand lightly over Jessica's. It's a hand up, Pearl added softly, not a hand out. Jessica looked down for a moment, then back up again. For the first time, something in her expression steadied. She took a slow breath. I want to try.